think of this day as Palm Sunday, the prayer book has a slightly different title for it. It calls it the Sunday of the Passion, Palm Sunday. And that dual focus will be something that we'll be attending to throughout these sessions. To consider the biblical foundations, I'd like to start with the narrative that I think is most familiar to us that gives it the name Palm Sunday. This is often called the Gospel of the Triumphal Entry. It's one of those stories that we find in all four Gospels. There are not very many of those, actually, and I think that alone makes it quite notable. Each of them have unique details, but they essentially tell the same story. Jesus' entry into the holy city of Jerusalem in the week preceding his death and resurrection. Of course, the palms that give the name its day are one of the main details that we hear, that the crowds who greeted him had palms and spread them before him. But as I said, there's another focus of this day, that of the Passion. That is the story of Jesus's betrayal and his crucifixion. And that is another central part of this day. We'll have more to say about the Passion narrative as we move along. This day has quite an interesting history in its liturgical celebration. There's a truly priceless document that we have from the 4th century, from a woman who is most commonly called Egeria. We believe that she was a member of a religious community living somewhere in Western Europe, perhaps modern-day France or modern-day Spain. And she traveled to the Holy Land and kept a diary that told about her journeys, her travels, as well as the time that she spent in Jerusalem. And she tells us a lot about the way in which they celebrated the liturgy there. And she writes on this Sunday before Easter of a procession that they made. In the afternoon, they went up to the Mount of Olives and read the Gospel of the Triumphal Entry from Matthew. And then they, in a sense, did what the Gospel story tells. They made a procession. They had palm branches. The bishop rode a donkey, really taking on the role of Christ in this story. And they made their way from the Mount of Olives all the way into the city. Now, there's something, of course, very special about this, the ability to do this in the Holy City, where our Lord himself made this same journey. But as history progressed, this became an idea that other places wanted to do as well. And so in time, this idea of a procession with palms spread to other parts of the Christian world. At the same time, much of the inheritance that we as Anglicans, as Episcopalians have in the way of liturgy comes from Rome. And there we see in very early sources from, say, maybe the 600s or the 700s, that this was a day when the Passion was read, specifically the Passion according to Matthew. And so we see these two strains already found in early history. And by the time we reach medieval England and the environment from which the Church of England would emerge in the 16th century, we already see that this day has the focus on both the palms and making a procession with palms, as well as the reading of the Passion Gospel. But when the first prayer book was compiled by Archbishop Thomas Cranmer in the 1540s, some significant changes were made. In fact, the day was no longer called Palm Sunday. It had the simple title of the Sunday next before Easter. And in fact, there was nothing at all about palms in this day. The gospel reading was the reading of the Passion narrative from Matthew. The Triumphal Entry Gospel, the Palm Gospel, was read, if you can believe it, on the first Sunday of Advent, which seems to us perhaps a bit strange, but this was a practice that continued all the way up until the 1928 prayer book that was used in the Episcopal Church up until the 1970s. And so I sometimes hear complaints about the Passion Gospel being a part of the Palm Sunday experience. And some people say, oh, we should get rid of that and just do the palm aspect because that's how it used to be. I'm afraid that doesn't necessarily stand up to what our historical evidence is. Both have been very much important to this day, and it was with our current prayer book from 1979 that these two came back together to be an important part of our celebration of this day.